Good morning, everybody. Yeah, as you can see, I kind of shaved and trimmed my hair. The masks are coming off here in Columbia, Missouri. So, just time to tidy up a little bit. All right, this is a reaction to an interview that Tim Larkin gave to Robert Drysdale. Tim Larkin interviewed Robert Drysdale about Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. I'm a little disappointed in the interview because, he said it was about Brazilian Jiu Jitsu and self defense, and basically it's a history lesson from Robert Drysdale's perspective on his research, which, I mean, cool, interesting enough. I've done Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, a new take on Brazilian Jiu Jitsu history. Not bad, but, I go to Tim Larkin because his Sansu Kung Fu spinoff called Target Focus Training, which is a spinoff of Scars, which is another Sansu Kung Fu spinoff, um, contains some real life self defense information. And, I was actually hoping for a talk about the severe limitations of Brazilian Jiu Jitsu in some combat situations out there. Look, I forget his name, but there was a really highly ranked Brazilian Jiu Jitsu black belt and MMA coach last week. He got beat down really horribly by a group of people. And what was happening was he saw someone getting attacked and he jumped in and tried to intervene. I mean, it's a heroic thing to do. It's brave. I am not knocking his braveness. But, and it's funny because Brazilian people tell you it's impossible to take on multiple attackers, right? They tell you don't do it, you can't do it, nobody can do it, no martial art can do it. He jumped in to do it. And true to form, he grappled up with someone. What else is he going to do? It went to the ground and he started getting stomped. And then long after, I think he passed out, and they kept on stomping him and kicking him, and predictable results. So it's a tragedy, right? Look, I've done Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. There's value in it. If you're in a situation one on one where no other person intervenes and there are no weapons, no knife, no stick, no improvised weapons, and you're not on concrete, you're not in a typical city street with broken bottles and rocks and things all over the place and beer cans. And if your opponent knows nothing of fighting, gouging, attacking the testicles, attacking the eyes, attacking the throat, and biting you in the face, then it's probably the best system out there. Assuming you train against strikes, which most Brazilian jiu jitsu schools don't do anymore, from what I can tell. My entire about year or so I did in Brazilian jiu jitsu, we had about 4 or 5 times where we covered even defense against a single puncher kick, and twice where anything like a ground and pound. We were doing butterfly guard, I think, once, and that was it. Right? I got up to 2 stripes on my white belt, and that was it. So yeah, if you're under those stipulations, if your opponent knows no Kino Muay Thai, he's had no street fighting experience where people do bite you in close range, bite your ear, gouge your eyes, where people do intervene, it's good. If there's no crowd, if there's not a single onlooker, you talk to any police chief who looks over police reviews, police reports in a major town, an almost inevitable result is the fight goes to the ground, and a girlfriend kicks you in the face, stabs you, hits you with a stick, right? Let's be real, people. Let's be real. Let's see things in their context. If you're a point karate guy, you're not going to win a full contact match solely with your point karate training. You have to adapt it. Look at how well Lyoto Machida did, and Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, and George St. Pierre. Actually, if you look at it, karate and art, which gets mocked by the MMA crowd, has done pretty damn well in the UFC, in MMA. So, what you talking about? Anyway, so I like listening to Tim Larkin because, first of all, he shows a lot of video footage of what an actual injury to the body from a strike to the eye, the throat, the knee, the groin, the ankle looks like. you know, what a hit to the side of the neck looks like, um, and you can see anatomically what's happening, why these moves are part of, uh, old school martial arts. But anyway, he said something. I think it was interview three. Because I was like, "Where's the self defense? Where's the self defense? Where's the street fight talk? Where's the talk about limitations and how to adapt your Brazilian jiu jitsu to the street?" And then I didn't really see that in interview one and two, and then I got to interview three, and Robert Drysdale, said bizarre statement, one of the most nonsensical things I've heard in the martial arts, next to Stephen Kesting, who said that Chinese martial arts are as if you tried to train powerlifting, weightlifting, squatting, but you never actually lifted a weight, and people came up with all these bizarre ways of manipulating the bar, but no one had ever actually lifted a weight. It's as dumb as that statement because, if you look at the first moment European sailors came in contact with the Chinese, they talked about how they were having public, they called it Chinese boxing matches, in city squares and stuff all the time, and we're betting on it. Where have you been? Or the fact that Hong Kong in the 40s, 50s, and 60s was people were always fighting. There were fights all the time, street fights, schoolyard fights, how there were challenge matches, how people were killed, how in World War II the Big Knife Brigade took on the Japanese. I mean, uh, Robert W. Smith talks about in Taiwan how there were full contact matches. People would wear boxing gloves. In New York City, you had all these kung fu schools meeting for full contact tournaments. The Fu Jiao Pai people talk about it a lot, but other people were doing it. Where have you been? Like, where do you people come to these conclusions? Do you never? I think this is what happens when you never talk to black people and Latin people and Asian people who live in cities and who deal with violence. And this is what happens when you never talk to anybody who's either done time in a prison or worked as a guard in a prison. And this is what happens when you never talk to police anybody that did anything in terms of martial arts and self defense in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and early 90s. It's as if they think that nothing existed. Nobody won a fight. Nobody won a full contact match. Nobody was ever knocked out. Nobody was ever killed in a hand to hand combat. In war, the Vietnam War never happened with all the hand to hand combat. The World War One and Two, none of that ever happened until the UFCs. It's as if fighting never existed before that. It's so stupid. Talk to black people. Talk to Latins and Asians, man. Not everybody lives in this sheltered suburban ass life you guys have lived, where your introduction to violence was watching the UFC and saying, I gotta learn me some Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. And talk to people outside of Brazil. Brazil's got a dueling culture. People say, I'll fight you one on one, and there could be 30 onlookers and they won't intervene, apparently. So, anyway, he said, Bef- I'll give credit to the Gracies. Robert Drysdale said this because before that, it was like Hollywood. Nobody knew if any technique worked or not because nobody had ever tried it out. Dude, you are ignorant. You are an epic level of ignorant of what went on in the world before your era. You know nothing about how violence works, what happened, and what humanity is like, and what cities are like, what happens in an inner city when you've got a bunch of people who don't have much money or much resources, living in crowded conditions, living in a society that oppresses them and limits their economic capability, limits their earning potential. For example, most of America had zoning laws where black people were not allowed to move out of their neighborhoods, where you couldn't sell to black people, sell houses to black people, where you have generations of people that grow up with less, surrounded by people that have more, where there's things like drugs and alcoholism and prostitution and gangs. And he actually thinks that none of these people who live in very violent areas learn martial arts. and use them, and he never thought to ask them. Go to my hometown, Hamilton. Hamilton's a funny place. You know why Hamilton's a funny place? Because it's a very high income area. Some really high income people, educated people move to Hamilton because there's tech jobs and industry and lots of medical and scientists and things like that. But there's also inner city Trenton right there, and the schools are integrated. Inner city kids go to school with very rich society kids, and strangely enough, this is going to sound weird to you, but I was there in the '80s, and people got along. People talked and intermingled, and certainly we did martial arts back then. You had the Jade Dragon, which taught Tang Sudo. Um, Steve Chambers, he fought in the ring. He fought no contact. He fought light contact, continuous. He fought on the streets. His students fought on the streets. You had Wires Institute of American Karate. You had a lot of good fighters. You had suburban kids that wound up being good fighters and would have smokers and things on weekends and bare knuckle matches with kids that grew up in ghettos. And it was friendly, right? And there wasn't a lot of guns and shooting even amongst the gangs. New York City, talk to anybody who, talk to any of Kevin Thompson's students in Newark, talk to Saif Carmen, talk to anybody who was in the Crips and Bloods. It's as if you people think that the martial art world began in 1993 with the UFC. You're insane. You're insane. You're ignorant. You're unknowledgeable. You speak from a position of either high ignorance or maybe you know these things and you're purposely not telling him. I don't want to impugn you like that. You literally don't know. You are a very ignorant man when it comes to the history of real world violence and what happens out there in other martial arts. Same with Brazilian jiu-jitsu. I've talked to people in Brazilian jiu-jitsu and I've said, yeah, well, when I was in high school or grade school, this is what happened. When I was in the military, this is what happened. I was in tons of fights. I lost just about every single one until I started learning martial arts. And then when I started learning martial arts, I had very limited training. I did a lot of practice on my own. I sparred with my friends. Um, one of the big credits I'll give is Rick Hahn, Master Rick Hahn, who, if you're listening to this, you saved my bacon a few times. I was studying your style and you taught me how to react, and we'd have these live reaction drills, and sometimes people would take you down and get you in headlocks and stuff. Sometimes you turn out the lights and people would ambush you from behind and tackle you to the ground. And we had a linoleum floor and hard cement walls. I never saw a mat a single day in my life. We practiced takedowns there and break falls, right? And I couldn't stay at your school because I was training at two places simultaneously. And you guys took a long, long time to do certain things, uh, including sparring. But my other school, we were sparring all the time. And I was living a life where people were actually throwing punches at me in real life all the time. And the other stuff was more Okinawan based. Strangely enough, though, your style had an influence on it through one of Jeff's teachers. And you taught me how to deal with grapplers. And, it's amazing what happens when you grab someone's testicles or shove a finger in their eye or do a neck crank rather than a choke. I mean, it was you that taught me that when someone's diving for my legs or waist, that I can bring my hand down and get a guillotine choke, save them off. Right? I didn't know. I think at some point I spontaneously discovered how to guard. Um, although it wasn't sophisticated, I didn't do any manipulation with it. But all this stuff existed way before you Brazilian Jiu Jitsu people showed up on the scene. You took judo grappling to a high level. You get kudos for that. But what you're doing with this bizarre revisionist history you keep telling yourselves and your student, it's irresponsible, it's insane, and it is wrong. Man, talk to people. Talk to people. And guess what? Most of you Brazilian Jiu Jitsu people out there today, you don't spend any time against street attacks. You don't spend any time defending against. I mean, Gracie Combatives is great. I love it. I took the course. I subscribed to the course. I've looked at the lessons and I use that. I practice that, right? But we never did any Gracie Combatives, and I've never seen a whole Gracie Combatives punch defense series being done anywhere at any time in any class that I've observed of any Brazilian Jiu Jitsu school or a class or a club. You guys start on your butts and you work for points, and you use a lot. I've seen you guys use butterfly guard and half guard and de la Hiva and all these things, which don't apply as much to the street as, say, the Gracie punch defense series or the basic takedowns, fighting for the takedown. And oftentimes it's a race to see who pulls guard first, which I think even the old school Brazilians are like, don't do that. Learn how to fight for the takedown. Learn how to defend against the takedown. So most of you aren't even doing what the Gracies did, when they were at their peak of challenge matches. And most of you think it's impossible to survive a multiple person attack. I have. Okay? I have. More than once. And it's possible to train it, right? And most of you do a knife defense once or twice every 6 months, whereas most violence on the street is with knives and sticks. And you think you have nothing to learn from Filipino martial arts, or even Japanese jiu-jitsu, or even a striking system like karate or taekwondo. If it was done old school, you did these weapons defenses all the time. Okay? People. You don't talk to people from cities. You don't talk to black people, and you don't talk to anyone that lived through the 60s, 70s, 80s, or 90s. And they're still around. They have things to teach you. It's on you if you choose to be so ignorant that you think nobody tested anything out and learned anything about real world deadly combat before 1993. How ignorant.